Did you know that the French Revolution, one of the most significant events in history, had more behind it than just economic hardship and political corruption? While those are often considered the main causes, there's a much deeper and more complex story that shaped the events leading up to 1789. Today, we're going to take a closer look at the true causes of the French Revolution and how it forever changed the course of history. But before we begin, let me ask you, what do you think caused the French Revolution? Was it the economic inequality between the rich and the poor? Or was it the absolute power held by the monarchy? Maybe you think it was simply the anger of the common people, tired of paying heavy taxes while the nobility and the royal family lived in luxury. If you answered any of those questions, you're not entirely wrong. These factors played a crucial role. However, there was something even deeper at play, a combination of political, social, and intellectual forces that led to the explosive events of 1789. In order to understand the true cause of the revolution, we need to go back to the state of France before 1789. By the late 18th century, France was facing severe economic distress. The French monarchy, under King Louis XVI, had accumulated massive debts from costly wars, including France's involvement in the American Revolutionary War. These debts, combined with lavish spending by the royal family and an outdated system of taxation, placed a crushing burden on the common people, particularly the peasantry. The Third Estate, which consisted of peasants, urban workers, and the bourgeoisie, was responsible for most of the taxes, while the First Estate, clergy, and Second Estate, nobility, enjoyed privileges and exemptions. This system of inequality was unsustainable, and it began to breed resentment among the common people. But there was something more, an intellectual shift happening in France that would change the course of history forever. In the years leading up to the Revolution, Enlightenment thinkers like Jean-Jacques Rousseau, Voltaire, and Montesquieu began to challenge the traditional structures of authority, particularly the absolute monarchy. Their ideas, which advocated for democracy, equality, and freedom of thought, were gaining traction among the educated elite and the rising middle class. One of the most influential ideas was Rousseau's concept of the social contract, which argued that rulers should govern with the consent of the governed. This directly challenged the idea of the divine right of kings, which held that monarchs were appointed by God and could rule with unchecked power. But it wasn't just the philosophers. Public discourse was shifting. Newspapers and pamphlets became a powerful tool for spreading ideas, and many members of the bourgeoisie, middle class, began to call for political reforms, including a constitutional monarchy that would limit the king's powers. These ideas were gaining momentum, but they were about to collide with the reality of France's dire situation. By 1789, Louis XVI had called the Estates General, a representative assembly, to address the country's financial crisis. The French government was on the brink of collapse, unable to pay its debts, and the king had no choice but to summon the Estates General for the first time in over 170 years. The Estates General was supposed to represent the three estates of French society: the First Estate, clergy; the Second Estate, nobility; and the Third Estate, common people. However, when the Third Estate, representing the vast majority of France's population, arrived at the Estates General, they quickly realized they were at a disadvantage. Each estate had one vote, meaning the clergy and nobility could easily outvote the commoners. The Third Estate was disenfranchised, despite representing over 95% of the population. This led to growing frustration among the commoners, who had been bearing the brunt of the country's economic struggles. But what happened next was crucial. On June 17, 1789, the Third Estate declared itself the National Assembly, claiming to represent the true will of the French people. They vowed to write a new constitution and limit the power of the monarchy. This was a direct challenge to King Louis XVI's authority, and it signaled the beginning of a power struggle between the monarchy and the people. At this point, Louis XVI made a fatal mistake. Instead of negotiating with the National Assembly, he attempted to lock them out of the meeting hall and prevent them from meeting. In response, the members of the National Assembly met in a tennis court nearby and swore the famous tennis court oath, pledging not to separate until they had written a new constitution for France. This was the moment when it became clear that a revolution was in the making. Tensions in France were reaching a boiling point. On July 14, 1789, Parisian citizens, fueled by fear of the king's military crackdown and the spread of revolutionary ideas, stormed the Bastille, a prison in Paris symbolizing royal tyranny. The fall of the Bastille was a symbolic victory for the revolutionaries, who had long been oppressed by the monarchy and the nobility. The storming of the Bastille is widely considered to mark the official beginning of the French Revolution. It was a direct challenge to the king's authority and a symbol of the people's demand for liberty, equality, and fraternity. As the revolution progressed, things took a darker turn. In the years following the fall of the Bastille, the French Revolution became increasingly radical, and a group of revolutionaries known as the Jacobins, led by Maximilien Robespierre, took control. In an attempt to protect the revolution from internal and external threats, the Jacobins launched the Reign of Terror, a period of intense political repression and mass executions. During this time, anyone suspected of being an enemy of the revolution, whether royalists, moderates, or even fellow revolutionaries, was executed by guillotine. King Louis XVI and his queen, Marie Antoinette, were both executed during this period. The Reign of Terror would claim thousands of lives and leave the nation in turmoil. In the wake of the Reign of Terror, France was left in chaos. The monarchy had been overthrown, and the country was struggling to maintain order. Amid this turmoil, a young general named Napoleon Bonaparte emerged as a powerful leader. Napoleon would eventually seize control of France and declare himself emperor, marking the end of the French Revolution and the beginning of the Napoleonic era. The French Revolution had profound and lasting effects on France and the world. It marked the end of absolute monarchy in France and established the principles of democracy and citizen rights. It inspired revolutions across Europe and the Americas, and its influence can still be seen in modern political systems today. The Declaration of the Rights of Man and of the Citizen, passed by the National Assembly in 1789, became one of the foundational documents of the Revolution, declaring the rights of individuals to liberty, property, security, and resistance to oppression. The revolution also had significant social consequences, as it dismantled the feudal system and promoted equality before the law. However, it also brought violence, instability, and the rise of Napoleon, who would establish a new, albeit authoritarian, regime. The causes of the French Revolution were far more complex than just the economic hardships or the actions of a few individuals. While these factors played a major role, it was the confluence of political, intellectual, and social forces that ultimately led to the downfall of the monarchy and the rise of a new France. At its core, the French Revolution was about the people's desire for freedom, equality, and representation. It was a response to centuries of absolute rule, social inequality, and intellectual oppression. In the end, the revolution changed the course of history, not only in France but around the world, laying the groundwork for the modern ideas of democracy and human rights that continue to shape our world today. If you enjoyed this in-depth exploration of the French Revolution, don't forget to subscribe, like, and share your thoughts in the comments below. What do you think was the most important factor that led to the revolution? Let's continue the discussion.